We see a lot of the problem is based on divide and conquer. We have poor and working people pitted against each other. So you have black versus white or male versus female in jobs, immigrants, new immigrants being forced to work for much lower wages, which brings the wages down for everybody, and even landlord against tenant. So we see that the problem lies in that divide and conquer, and we bring people together. We work with organizations whose members are facing these kinds of problems, and as they're fighting these struggles, bring lawyers to provide the legal guidance that people need to be able to fight.
Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of New York 100. Today I'm sitting with two very special guests. First time in New York history that we had two guests at once, so that's very good. And so I do a lot of work with my uncle. He's a jazz musician here in New York, and I go to a lot of his events and film. And one of the events I went to was what you would call a CCLP fundraiser. So I was really admired about what the organization does, reached out, and now we're here today. So if you've been around the news, you watch any type of news, you know that here in New York or the US, there are a lot of, we have a little bit of nicks in our justice system and our criminal system. So I want to kind of talk on how can we actually fix our system, what are the things that we need to improve on. Also, if you need to, find assistance, legal assistance, how can you get that within the New York area? So I'm sitting with two very special guests that's going to address those two things. And before I say anything, I have to give a disclaimer that this is only for educational purposes. So if you'd like more information, I'll give you their information so that you can reach out to them directly. So again, so Susan and Ron, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it. And I guess the first question is, what is CCLP?
Okay. Well, thank you for having us. Thank you for coming here and doing this. Coalition of Concerned Legal Professionals is an all-volunteer, non-government funded membership organization of attorneys. It's an organizing drive. We're a membership organization of attorneys, clergy, business people, students, working people who are concerned about the lack of access to recourse in the legal system, because so many people cannot afford to pay for a lawyer. And there are many other problems, as you started to hint on, in the legal system. People can't afford lawyers. The government has been defunding the courts. A lot of the government programs that are supposed to protect poor and working people are being defunded.
And the defunding of the courts, is that
why is it happening?
Why are we funding this less and less?
Well, I think historically the legal system has been one of the areas that underserved poor people, unions can get regress. That issues can be addressed. Many of the benefits we got out of the civil rights movement, for example, were because the courts stood and made the governments enforce the laws. So there are many great laws on the books, but the laws weren't enforcing them. So Thurgood Marshall, for example, on the Supreme Court, he became a member of the Supreme Court based on his work as a civil rights attorney representing NAACP, for example. So that the courts were how we got able to increase the ability of the people, poor people, underprivileged, underserved people, a way of getting the benefits they deserve. Poor people pay taxes too, but poor people don't get the benefits of the taxes that they pay.
And why do you think we're being underfunded now? And why do you think that's something that's becoming more prevalent?
Well, it's underfunded now because the courts, since the 1960s, actually 1950s, the courts have been helpful to poor people. Now, those in power want to take back the benefits that poor people got out of that. Out of the struggles.
Poor people and many working people, it's generally.
Take back the power. That's quite a, so, all right. Originally, these organizations were to benefit these people. Now we're regressing, and I guess there's there's a trend for the power to shift back to those in control. I mean, did I get that correctly, or?
Well, yes. A lot of people think that. I heard a thing today on the news where there's a teacher strike in Chicago.
Yes.
And the strike is over now. And one of the major newspapers in Chicago wrote an editorial blasting the union for going on strike because they're trying to make the schools better for the children. But they attacked the teachers as they were doing something else. They're trying to get social workers in the schools. They're trying to get a nurse in every school. Rich folks have had nurses and social workers available to them all the time. The children that need them most are the children on inner cities and also in rural areas of the country. And they get the less resources because those in power think that these people should not get that the government shouldn't be instrumental in making sure that teachers get paid well and students get teachers that they need and deserve.
Okay.
There's also more and more, they've been privatizing the courts, putting it into mandatory arbitration, which is a more complicated concept, but it's a whole effort when some of the big corporations wanted to figure out, the lawyers for the big corporations worked out how they could protect their clients from major class action lawsuits and from by consumers or employees.
Okay.
So they put everything into mandatory arbitration, which basically privatized the courts.
Okay, so here's the thing. So I'm a videographer, so I have to kind of like really kind of break it down a little bit, and I'm sure maybe you you want it to be broken down as well. So first off, what is privatization of the courts? I'm going to be real basic, but yeah, what is privatization? So
okay. Well, the laws, if you have a legal issue, you're living in a house and the landlord is not providing the services and so you're not paying the rent, the landlord may take you to court or you may take the landlord to court. However, in a lot of contracts as a consumer or in leases, these contracts, because a lease is a contract, it says in there that you can't go to the courts, you have to arbitrate it. So therefore an arbitrator is hired and they sit as almost like a judge so the landlord and tenant goes to an arbitrator. But the arbitrator doesn't do things based on the law, based on how they see that particular situation, whereas a court is governed by the law. So an arbitrator can decide against a tenant. A tenant says, I'm not paying the rent because the toilet is leaking on the floor in my apartment. And so I'm not paying the rent. And the law says the landlord has to fix that. Otherwise the tenant can't withhold the rent. An arbitrator can say, no, you're going to have to go pay the rent.
Okay. I'm trying to understand. So an arbitrator protects is more so. What is arbitration?
The real it's not the real problem we've seen with this is that the corporation. Maybe we can strike all of this. But with with our mandatory arbitration, the company that you're suing pays the arbitrator.
Okay.
And 2 out of 3 times they rule in favor of the company that you're suing.
Okay.
There's a repeat player bias is really the bottom line. And that's not, it's something that we have written about and are educating people about, because a lot of people don't know that that's something that's happening.
Okay, so if I can get an understanding of this, so the official government court, I really want to make sure I understand it. So, okay, an arbitrator or privatization, meaning that the law is more so governed by corporations, or
Well, they're not governed by the laws. They're governed by rules that corporations make up.
Okay.
Or they put in contracts, which is a lease is a contract, or when you take out and go get a credit card. In the contract, many of them say mandatory arbitration. So it says, you can't take me to court, you have to go to an arbitrator. And a court is governed by the laws, where the arbitration practices are governed by, or too oftentimes, by the arbitrator and not based on what is correct under the law.
Gotcha. I understand that. All right. And so if I want to bring this back to CCLP, CCLP is acting as an entity to help people, I guess.
Well, the privatization is just one example.
Okay, brilliant.
But we are an organizing drive of attorneys and other people who are concerned about some of the problems in the legal system.
Okay.
And one thing that we do is we work with, we're building relationships with, we partner with different organizations of primarily low-income workers.
Okay.
We actually grew out of a domestic worker organizing drive, organizing domestic workers and the elderly, blind, and disabled recipients they cared for, and they got into a big legal battle, and the lawyers involved in that said, we really need our own organization to take on these kinds of fights.
Okay.
So we work with organizations, churches, immigrant organizations, advocacy organizations, low-income worker organizations. And we have a benefit program for the membership of those organizations that include Know Your Law sessions, which are educational presentations on the law. So we have lawyers speak. We've done a lot of presentations on what do you do if you've been arrested or stopped by the police.
Okay.
We've done, and that saves lives if people know things that they should and shouldn't do. We've done sessions on wage theft, what to do if you're cheated on your wages, what to do if your civil rights are violated. We've done a number of sessions on elder law for some of the senior centers in this area. We've done sessions on immigration, consumer debt, kind of you name it, whatever the organization's members are looking for a lawyer to speak on, mortgage foreclosures, landlord-tenant law. And then a lot of times the people who come to those sessions, their members need more, the people who come to those sessions also need specific advice. So then they can come to our office and we run legal advice sessions. And we have lawyers here. We at a legal advice session, we usually have a lawyer here. And we have lay volunteers, usually a college student, a paralegal, a law student, or just anyone who wants to help. And the lay person does an interview, finds out what the problem is, helps explain it to the lawyer, and then the lawyer can give advice on how, and together the team, the lawyer, the advocate, and the person needing help work out a plan for follow-up.
Okay. All right. So I just want to take it a whole step back here. So how did CCLP begin? What was the origin stories of CCLP? And what does CCLP stand for, actually? Yeah, just so we all know.
Well, I'll let Susan take it.
Okay, it's the Coalition of Concerned Legal Professionals.
Okay.
And we actually got our start, we started here in New York using the model of an organization of domestic workers, of lawyers who, the first chapter of CCLP developed out of an organizing drive of domestic workers and the elderly, blind, and disabled recipients of their care, who had united to deal with some of the problems that both the workers and recipients were facing. Okay. And the lawyers who got involved in a big lawsuit decided that they could accomplish more, and they were also doing a lot of legal work for the workers and the recipients, volunteering legal problems that poor and working people face. So they decided they could accomplish a lot more if they had their own organization. And
Okay, and then, and this organization started in 1998, correct?
The first New York City office, I opened up the New York City office with another organizer in 1998 in a church in Bed-Stuy. But we had lawyers and other people in New York volunteering with low-income worker organizations throughout the state, really. But so that was since the mid-'70s. But we opened an office in a church in Bed-Stuy in 1998.
All right. So what were some of the, I guess? So you've been operating for about two decades now. Yeah, 2 decades. So how do you, first off, why is it important to build such an organization I guess I'll start with that then. So why is it important to build some sort of organization for the community? Why is it important to reach out and build organizations for people who can't really, or underrepresented?
Well, we certainly do believe that one of the reasons why the average person doesn't get the resources or services that they pay taxes for and work for, wages and et cetera, is that the communities aren't organized. So it's like a labor union. They would not have very much influence if they were not, all the workers in the union, say the transport workers union here in New York City, if there was no union, then they're disorganized and they would not have medical benefits. They would not have sick pay. These are things because they've organized and demanded those things, just like the teachers' strike talked about before in Chicago. So when people are organized, then they can get what they deserve, what they fought for, what they paid for. And that's what organization does. So the most disorganized people in this country are probably the poorest of people, okay? Because they're worried about getting food on their table. They don't have time to go to meetings, et cetera, et cetera. They have everyday problems that they need to solve. But when they're organized and they come to legal sessions where they can get legal information, they can see an organization that is there to help them to get what they deserve.
So what is the process of becoming organized? So how do we get from, like you said, thinking about immediate, short-term and necessities to long-term benefits, results? And so what is that process of organized? What is that, I guess like the process of getting organized then?
CCLP is an organization of attorneys, or primarily attorneys, but we work with other organizations. So do you mean, how did we start organizing, or how
as a community, and say, what would, as a community or someone within, I guess a low-income, community or whatnot, what are the steps that maybe people should be taking to become more organized so that they can be better prepared to, advocate for themselves?
One of the things, they find out that they're not alone.
Okay.
So, for example, if you have a legal problem, and almost everybody has a legal problem, there's almost no getting around it. I can tell you, I give out my card every once in a while. People say, "Oh, I sure can use a lawyer." I gave out 2 cards today, and that's exactly what people said. And so when people see that if I'm renting an apartment and I'm having a problem with my landlord, and there's 50 apartments in the building, I may think I'm the only one. But if you go to a tenant meeting or you come to a CCLP meeting and you recognize there's other folks, we all have problems. If we work together, we can resolve this.
Got it.
So there's strength in numbers, there's strength in unity.
Got it.
And a legal CCLP as a legal organization in that self is only one of the things it does. It uses the legal system to help get people organized so they can get together and take care of themselves mutually, that we look out for each other. And so when you're in an organization, whether it's a student organization, whether it's a union, whether it's a block association, there's strength in numbers, and that's why those organizations exist, so people can collectively get together, make demands, get the things that they want and need, and it's a lot of times it's needs. Poor people and those who are underserved have needs that are not being met, while the rest of this country, the richest country on the face of the earth, we have more people in jail than any other country, numerical-wise, and we have probably greater numbers of poor people in the sense in relationship to the super rich that would exist in this country.
So CCLP acts as a body that helps people organize, gives them the tools to become more aware of the situation, become more aware of their rights, become more aware. Is it okay?
That's part of it. For example, through the legal sessions, say there's a church or an immigrant organization, and all their members are facing or some of their members have problems with consumer debt, with immigration. We might have a lawyer go out there and speak on the law, but we also can then show people other things that they can do. Or we have people come to our legal advice sessions, and I'll give you an example. We identify patterns of practice that we can then bring people together to fight those problems collectively.
Okay.
So You want me to give you some
No,
examples?
go ahead.
So, for example, through our legal advice sessions, we've had situations where around 2008, we were starting to see problems with the mortgage foreclosures. There were problems before that and since then, but that was, when it was getting stronger. So on the one hand, we had our lawyers walk people through winning cases, and we've helped people save homes from foreclosure, that sort of thing. But then we were also looking at, well, what are the bigger problems and how can lawyers get involved in that? And we looked at the whole financial shenanigans that were going on that created the problem.
Yes.
And a couple of our lawyers were actually it had expertise in navigating the court, because they put in, it's more complicated and I'm trying to simplify it, but they put in these laws that said that the financial institutions had to help the homeowners modify their loans, restructure their loans so that they could keep their homes. And the banks went through the motions, but they really weren't trying to do that, the financial institutions. So the lawyers who were, so we had lawyers with expertise in that area who both educated low-income communities, but also educated other lawyers. And then we published articles about it in our publications. And then we began partnering with one of our lawyers who wrote for the publication, who then had started a foreclosure defense bar. So then through that process, on the one hand, you meet more people who need help. You can work with ways to help people, but you're also looking at ways to bring the legal community together with the low-income community and put those legal resources to bear to also look at, bigger systemic problems that we can address.
So one of the underlying, things that I'm hearing is education. People need to be more educated. So you mentioned that you have you have educational programs or training. What are some of the programs that you offer here at CCLP?
Well, one of the key ones is what I participate in, a legal advice sessions. In other words, a lawyer would come here on usually a Saturday and for 3 or 4 hours sit with people who have scheduled an appointment to talk to a lawyer. And they may have various things that they want to raise. It could be criminal, it could be landlord-tenant, it could be home foreclosure, it could be a divorce, all these different things, so that advice is given to them, solutions are presented to them, so they can proceed with their action. If they're being taken to court or they need to take somebody else to court. So they can get a solution to their problem. And certainly if they're facing eviction or their house is going to be foreclosed against, and we can give them the information that they can use to stop that foreclosure, to stop that bank from taking their house, and give them an opportunity to fight that. Because most people cannot really afford a lawyer. And so if they can't, that means all the houses, and Brooklyn and Queens are the two biggest areas in the city, that hundreds or thousands of houses have been foreclosed upon in the last 10 years.
And does that does that kind of blend into what's happening with, gentrification and whatnot? Because
Absolutely.
People don't have okay, it's clicking now. So people don't really have okay, go ahead.
Right. So what happens is investors can buy these houses that are being foreclosed. And the people are losing their houses based on being taken advantage of when they bought the house. Because many of them couldn't afford the mortgage, certainly not at the rate and the expense. And you had all sorts of mechanisms in place that took advantage of them, which included real estate brokers, title companies, attorneys. But it all started with the banks. And the banks lending money to somebody that could only afford paying maybe $1,500 a month on their mortgage, and giving them a mortgage and they're paying $3,000 a month. There's no way they can do that. And so too many people were taken advantage of. Lies were told, fraud was committed, and people lost their houses. And they lost their dignity. They spent all that money, time, effort, and energy, and they resulted in taking to court and being the house that they helped raise their children and was taken from them.
So one of the ways to, I guess, avoid this, is to attend one of your sessions. So one of your sessions are you have the legal advice sessions. Do you have more sessions as well, or is that?
We have the Know Your Law sessions,
Know Your Law.
We primarily work with organizations for those sessions. So we reach out to different, for example, in this area we work with different churches, St. Nicholas of Tolentine, Church of the Mediator, Mothers on the Move, Casa Germain, and we meet with the organizations and we find out what subjects their members are interested in. The Senior Center on Marble Hill.
All right. I guess this just came in my head. So, okay, I operate a business, right? And it's funny how I didn't know how much I needed law, right? Some people just think that, I operate a business, I just do my business. I just sell this, I sell that. But there's more and more things with contracts, with all these different things. I was like, wow, I mean, I wish I had taken, I did a degree in business. Business law was not even a part of it. Mm-hmm. So to an extent, how much do you think general law should be actually instilled in our educational system?
Should be.
That's a good question. I think it leads you down the path. In other words, law is involved in everything.
Yep.
There's no way getting around it. And the point you raised, the fact that doesn't exist, like social studies or science, chemistry, etc., algebra, those things are all needed. But knowing the law and knowing that you can get solutions to your problems with that, because otherwise it gets used against you. It's too late. Oftentimes it's too late then that you didn't have. For example, in the foreclosure thing, one of the things that they used to take advantage of, they gave that person an attorney, and which is incorrect. That's a violation of ethics. You should get your own attorney. If somebody gives you an attorney, their obligation of that person, that attorney, is for the person who gave them that job.
Got it. Gotcha.
In other words, so if I'm a real estate broker and I want to sell this house, and you want to come buy the house, okay? I got a lawyer for you.
Oh,
okay.
So
the lawyer is obligated to me, not to you.
You're looking for their best interest.
Right.
Then. Got it.
Exactly. So people did not have lawyers working for them, because if they had, a lot of that stuff would not have taken place.
Wow. I just think it's funny that some of the most prominent things that adults face, which is tax and law, we don't learn.
You're right.
We don't learn that. So that's quite interesting. So I want to hit on a few points. As I said in the intro, there's a lot of, well, first off, I mean, I love America. I love being American, love America. We can walk outside as Americans, and we do have a luxury that some other countries don't have, which is general safety. We don't have to walk out the door and worry about, X amount of things happening. But there is a lot that we need to improve on. So what I want to ask is, I wrote it down here. So what do you think is the missing element in the justice system? What is it missing? What's wrong with the fundamental problem of what's wrong with our justice system here in the States?
Well, I'm going to Susan go first. I can tell you something.
Okay.
Well, I think it's probably what's wrong with this. The major reason of this country there's two things wrong with this country, big issues with this country in my mind. One is the income imbalance. So for too many years, the justice system has been based on those who have the money winning the courts. And they either do that because the people who are making the decisions in the court looks like them, which is the other major issue, which is racism that exists in this country. So, and those two things have worked hand in hand and are the basis for all of the injustices in this country. Again, income imbalance and the racism that exists. So that a judge making a decision, if two people come before me and I owe my judgeship to this person over here, and I know that person, I know their family, and this person I've never even seen before and could care less about them. They don't look like me, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to rule in favor of this person. That has how the criminal justice in this country has worked for too long,
So
for hundreds of years.
discrimination, and then, like you said, just to recap, income imbalance and racism within the country.
Correct. I think those are the two biggest problems. So, and we as Americans, even those of us who are low income, poor, middle class, working people, also think the resolution to our problems is more money. And that's something that we've accepted. We've accepted the racism part and accepted the solution to everything is money. And that's not. And if we walk down those two roads, actually it's one road in my mind, then we get the results that we get, the injustices that permeate this, every element of this country. Racism is built into the very fabric of this country. It was born out of racism, and it was born out of the economic basis for making decisions. So everything, what the economic solution was, that's the one we went with. And even those of us on the bottom of this society have ingrained that with us, so we think that's our solution. But when we organize them, we get together and say, like unions do, like block associations do, recognize that we have a dependency on each other, and our solution is in other people and not in being racist or having discriminatory practices or seeing our solutions in the basis of, if I get more money, I can solve all my problems.
Okay, so and then Susan, from your perspective, what do you think is one of the major problems within our justice system that needs to be focused on?
Well, it's that access or recourse to the legal system. Partly what Ron was saying, and also Harvard Law School did a study a few years ago, like 20 years ago, that 95% of lawyers work for 1% of the population.
Wow.
Yeah, most working people can't afford to pay for a lawyer. And even with the legal aid and legal services, the different organizations that are there to provide legal resources for people who can't afford it. And we work with some of the lawyers involved in those different organizations. But number one, because they're government funded, they can't file major class action lawsuits. They can't fight for organizations, and they can't fight the government. And number two, it's created a legal system that's driven, that hasn't created it. The legal system itself is driven by money, so that the police get their funding based on how many arrests they make. Wow. The prosecution gets its funding based on convictions, and the jails and prisons are also big money makers. This is on the criminal side. But the lawyers who are there to provide the legal aid lawyers or whatever, the government-funded lawyers are so overworked and underfunded that they just are plea bargaining. So on the criminal side, you have 99.45% of cases in New York City are plea bargain, which is where the person who's accused is not going to have the time to get a trial and not going to have the resources to get a trial, so they're pretty much in a position of pleading guilty without a trial.
And whether they're guilty or not.
Whether they're guilty or not.
Wow. I remember having to do jury duty like a few weeks back, and I didn't actually do it because they called my number and whatnot, and they said there's no case, and usually they drop a case. Usually in my back of my mind when they drop the case for jury duty, it's because someone probably called for a plea bargain. And then so one of the fundamental reasons you said is that this whole system involves is embedded within like money and finance. So the legal system runs on money, as you said. Okay, and you also said that the biggest problem is income disparity and racism. So with money being the underlying, the same cause that you both said, so what is the solution then?
Well, it's, as Ron was saying earlier, we think it takes organization.
Okay,
And
gotcha.
what, I was talking a little bit earlier about some of the legal advocacy that we do, and then looking at ways through the legal advocacy. For example, we've taken on different situations recently with consumer debt, where we had I can tell you about one of the cases if that's something that'll give an illustration, but one of the people who came to us, actually it was a printing company that was donating. We get a lot donated because we're completely volunteer run and we don't take government funding. So a lot of businesses and other people donate the public printing of our newsletter, for example, because as their way that they can help, because we've involved the whole community in our work. Anyway, one of the printers, they wanted their workers to know a little bit. They were getting little notices in the mail about debts that they had, and the printer wanted them to know the law. So we brought a lawyer out to educate their workers. And then one of them, they started, a collection agency got a judgment to garnish their wages, or got a judgment for the company to take money out of their paycheck each month to give to the collection agent. The guy didn't know anything about the debt. So his boss, the person in HR at the company, said, "You go down to CCLP." So he came down to CCLP, and our volunteers did an interview with him, found out what the problem was. And it was a debt that was, he didn't know it. It was a different person, but the same name.
Wow.
And he had never gotten served, so he never even knew to go to court. So when the court case came up in court, they got a default judgment against him.
Wow.
So he came to our legal session. The lawyers and the advocate together showed him how he could vacate the default judgment and open up the case again. And he did that successfully. So then he came back to the next session, and they told him how he could get the case dismissed. They told him what paperwork to bring, and he got it dismissed. It saved him over $7,000. We've been getting more and more of those kinds of situations. So we're looking at ways that we can then reach out to more organizations whose members face those problems, have lawyers do educational presentations, do the individual advice and advocacy, and use that to bring the community together with the legal community, organizations in the community together with the legal community to work for solutions. We see a lot of the problem is based on divide and conquer. We have poor and working people pitted against each other. So you have black versus white, or male versus female in jobs, new immigrants being forced to work for much lower wages, which brings the wages down for everybody. And even landlord against tenant. We've had many examples. For example, we did a lot of advocacy for victims of the Hurricane Sandy and Hurricane Katrina, the people who got moved up here. And the government FEMA wasn't coming up with the money people were entitled to. So then the landlords and the tenants were fighting against each other. So we see that the problem lies in that divide and conquer, and we bring people together. We work with organizations whose members are facing these kinds of problems, and we show people what they have in common. And as they're fighting these struggles, bring lawyers to provide the legal guidance that people need to be able to fight.
So just to kind of wrap up here, there's two underlying, key aspects that I've learned from this interview so far. And it's inclusion, bringing people together. Sorry, three then. Inclusion, bringing people together, or organizing them so that they can bringing people together, that's one. Bringing organization and structure, and also providing the education. So I think that's what I've gotten out of CCLP. That's the three major things that you provide to people. And so my question is, before the conviction, before the lawyer, before this and that and the third, what do you think is, a fundamental solution that we can? Because the law, that's the result. Well, how can we begin to, look fundamentally, and what does that underlying thing that we can do? Is it the education? Is it the, what is the underlying thing that I guess we can do to, you know, I guess decrease or reduce the amount of convictions and legal problems and whatnot? What is that underlying thing?
That's what we're talking about, is getting more people involved, building the strength of organization, and doing that through all the things that we talked about, the legal advice, the legal advocacy, a newsletter that we publish, a concert that we do. All of those things bring people together.
So you provide, I mean, tremendous amount of work for the community. And so how can people first get involved? I mean, how can lawyers get involved too, or sponsors? How can people get involved to help out?
Okay. We need volunteers, and people can call us. Lawyers can help with everything from doing, like what Ron does, the legal advice sessions, doing the educational presentations on the law. We call them Know Your Law sessions. Lawyers can write about things that they're encountering in their practice or things that they're doing to overcome problems in their practice, and they can write for our publications. They can do classes. We do classes for the low-income community, but we also do classes for lawyers, so that we can bring more lawyers up to speed to help fight for the people coming through our doors. So lawyers can do all of those things. They can also host events. That's how we met Ron. His friend hosted an event at his house for New Year's and invited us and invited him, and we met, and he has been volunteering ever since. And people can learn how to organize. Lawyers can learn how to organize. Other volunteers who are not lawyers can also do a lot of the advocacy, the lay advocate role, where they learn how to interview a lawyer. I mean, learn how to interview somebody who needs help and help explain it to the lawyer, write for the publication, put our publications together, and also learn the organizing skills.
And in terms of sponsors, what would an ideal sponsor, I guess, obviously it would be, how can, if you're not a lawyer, okay, I guess if you're not a lawyer, how else can you get involved if you're not a lawyer?
Doing the lay advocacy, sometimes we get auto mechanics, for example. We get cars donated, so we get auto mechanics to fix the cars. So people with those skills can help. People can write, they can do desktop publishing, they can do photography at our events or at our legal sessions. They can help. A lot of the people who aren't lawyers also help to run the sessions, you know, mail out letters, make phone calls, reach out to organizations whose members might need help, reach out to organizations of lawyers, we do a lot of public speaking at colleges and law schools and churches and mosques and synagogues, both to educate people and then to also let people know that there's ways they can get involved.
Wow. And can you give us the phone number just so we all know? Yes,
212-791-1364. 212-791-1364.
That sounds like an infomercial, right?
Yeah, that number again.
So I just want to say first, thank you both for doing this. I appreciate it, and hopefully I'm doing my job of spreading the word. And this is what I do with media. It's all about spreading the word, getting the conversation. So if you're watching this and you're not here based in New York, then I'll ask you to do your share and share this video, comment, like, share the link, spread this conversation. And so you can do your part as well by spreading this conversation as well. So again, thank you so much. Thank you for watching this video. If you've learned a great deal, be sure to like this video and of course share, subscribe. And if you are in the New York area, do you operate outside of the New York area or?
No.
Okay, so if you are in
New York City, Long Island,
throughout
the state, really.
So if you're within the New York area and you're seeking this service, then I'm going to leave the phone information below so you can give them a call and see how you can either be of service or if you need service yourself. So thank you so much, and I'll see you guys next video. Remember, be great. Cheers.